Hey, y'all. This is Frank the Bigfoot, and you're listening to the Paranormal Punchers.
Hey, friends. Welcome to a special episode of Paranormal Punchers. I'm Mark.
I'm Alicia.
And on this bonus episode, Alicia and I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with author Jaydid about his book, about lucid dreaming, about a lot of other strange paranormal things. Plus, he also saw a UFO. So we had a blast doing it, and I hope you enjoy it also. Hey, friends. We're here with Jaydid. He's an author, just wrote a book called Trip in the Field. He's also an artist. He's a cartoonist. And at the age of 19, began spontaneously experiencing the phenomenon known as lucid dreaming. I think this is going to be so much fun. Ian, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, fantastic. Glad to be here.
So, I just want to jump right in. I'm really fascinated
Let's jump in.
with lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you explain to everybody out there exactly what that is?
Absolutely. So when a lot of people use that term, I'll say that what I've seen is that so often when people say, oh, I had a lucid dream, a lot of times they're saying, well, I had a really intense dream. It was very vivid. And I can understand that confusion because that sounds, like, yeah, lucid. We're talking about something that's vivid, intense. But when we're talking about when you actually use the term lucid dreaming, you're really referring to usually a very specific kind of dream. We're talking about a dream where at some point, either at the beginning or sometime during the storyline of the dream, whatever that may be, you basically wake up. And what I mean by that is that you become fully aware that the drama that you're involved in is absolute nonsense. It's complete. Hey, do we curse on this show? I just want to know.
Yeah.
What are the rules? What are the rules?
Yeah, it's okay. I call it a PG-13 show, but don't worry. If something slips out, I'll beep it.
No, okay, that's fine. It's just sometimes when we're talking about abstract subjects, I tend to fill in some of those words with bullshit, shit, whatever. So I'm not trying to curse as much as it's hard to describe some things. Anyway,
go ahead.
All right, back on point. We're talking about at some point you become fully aware, fully cognizant that, hey, this is a dream. Oh my God, what's going on? Like, I'm totally aware. And it doesn't mean the dream stops, those, crazy Nazi donuts are chasing you through some dark alley, whatever may be going on. At some point you stop and go, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And it's something that is a weird phenomena because on the one hand, dreams are weird because if you step back and go, well, why would I even believe that was going on in the first place? How many dreams have we had where in retrospect, you kind of wonder, why did I buy that storyline? Why was I even involved in that? That's such a ridiculous situation. And so in lucid dreaming, that's exactly what's happening. You're really having that cognizant, that conscious thought wait, what's going on? And what I found is that that is a doorway. It's a jumping board. It's a place where you can go into all kinds of very strange phenomena. And as I've been studying this phenomenon, I would say that it answers possibly a lot of very strange questions about the paranormal. And it's a place where, in my opinion, I think that we can all start. I think lucid dreaming is not a gift. I think it's something that anyone can pick up. If you have the real desire, if you have a real passion, you can start doing it. Now, like you said, this happened to me spontaneously. I had never really understood. I had never studied what lucid dreaming was at the time this started happening to me. I kind of had to just sort of take it at face value and work with it from there. So that's in a nutshell, lucid dreaming, waking up, realizing, okay, totally, this is absolute nonsense. Everything that's happening around me is either a part of my subconscious, whatever. I know I'm asleep. I know you may even know what day it is. I mean, you're very, I would be very conscious. I'd be totally aware of, I know about what time it is. I know I'm asleep. I totally know I'm dreaming. And so that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh yeah, and I want to see how that leads to the paranormal. But
Sure.
I always thought lucid dreaming, because I listen to Joe Rogan, and, and he's part of that company On It, and they have a product that's supposed to, good for your brain, but also can help with lucid dreaming. And I always thought lucid dreaming. I'm
not familiar with it, huh? Okay.
I'll look the name up while we talk here. And I tried a little bit, but I always thought lucid dreaming was like, all right, I know I'm in a dream right now, so therefore I'm going to do what I always want to do, and that's be Superman. I'm going to fly.
Well, you can. That's up to you. Like what? But the thing is that you got to get to that point first of like that realization, that base realization, and that is the trick. That's the whole trick. If you can get to that point, well, then what you do after that. Yeah, then things can get pretty weird after that, because I mean, essentially, we're saying you're now in a realm where you can kind of dictate what's going on to some degree. Now, I wouldn't say that means that you immediately have full control of what's going on, but you can start steering what's going on. Kind of like I always kind of compare it to sailing. You can't really control the wind, the water, but with enough experience, you can point that boat in the direction you want to go in, if that makes sense. And that's I think it's a good analogy, because in dreaming, you don't always have full control over everything that's going on. I mean, there's a whole lot of other factors that are being thrown at you, but you can learn how to direct it. And like I said, I'm sure that's where this conversation's going to go. We're going to talk about how weird that can get and the kind of questions it starts bringing up. And that's certainly what happened for me. It took years, but things got real weird. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, so if you could just kind of tie that into the paranormal. Absolutely.
So when you are in that place where you have that realization, there is something magic. I think that's the most important thing to this. This is the key right here that I'm about to say. There's something magical about disassociating from the drama. All right. So, and I would say that's true in our daily life as well, but it's certainly something that we can directly experiment with in our dreams. If you can get to that point where you can disassociate from the storyline, from the drama that's going on, whatever, think of the last crazy dream you had. If you could have just stopped and said, wait a minute, absolute nonsense. This is absolute garbage. Once you're able to stop, there's something that happens. Like I said, there appears to be some kind of doorway at that point where now your consciousness is not bound to the rules of the dream. Your attention and your energy is no longer caught up in, being James Bond or whatever problem you're dealing with in your crazy dream that you're having. Now, all of a sudden, you have this freedom. And so what I started to first explore is, well, what does that mean? What does that freedom mean for my base consciousness? And what I started finding, much to my dismay, I would say at first, is that I first started realizing that I could go to other places in these dreams. Then at that point, I then had the freedom to do what's commonly called, and I hate this word, but it's the phrase that we're using. It can lead into what's called astral projection. And again, I tend to be a very science, almost an atheist minded kind of a person. I don't like the woo woo. I don't like the spiritual kind of things. I think that all of this has a basis in some kind of science, perhaps theoretical physics, as the book that I wrote suggests, actually. But once your consciousness is free to roam and you're not bound to that storyline, I started finding that I could go to all sorts of places. I started looking for, hey, let's see what my friends are doing in Chicago. Let's see what my mom is doing in Oregon, or, that sort of thing. And then I found I was able to go to places where my friends were, sometimes hundreds of miles away, and I would kind of watch. That sounds like spying on someone, and that's not certainly the intention. You're just kind of I say that because I've had so many people like, I got to learn this technique because I want to spy on my boyfriend or my girlfriend. I'm like, well, if that's really your intention, I really don't think you're going to get a whole lot. You're not going to get real far if that's the limit to your motivation for all this. I want to spy and see what that no good so-and-so is doing, But anyway, I found that I was able to go and see where people, what they were doing. And I would kind of pay attention to exactly the scene that was playing out. And then later, after I woke up, I started making those phone calls and going, all right, Mom, at 7:30 this morning, exactly, you need to tell me exactly what were you doing, at this point? And when people started relating their stories to me, woof, woof, you got a dog. Yeah. The dog is excited about this topic. I think we should bring the dog in. When they started relating these exact, and I'm talking by the detail, exact scenes that I was witnessing, where I was asleep hundreds of miles away. As I said, my initial reaction to that was dread. I mean, it was kind of terrifying. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to be right. And I think a lot of people go, ooh, that's so exciting. That's so neat. But when you're actually faced with something like that, it can be pretty terrifying. I don't know. You guys are interested in this topic for a reason. I don't really know your specific background. Like, have you guys experienced paranormal phenomena where you had to go, okay, what I'm seeing in front of me is not natural. It doesn't seem to obey the laws of physics. There's something. Have you had those kind of things at all?
Now, I've always been fascinated in the paranormal.
Okay, fascinated by it. Okay,
and
right.
we've done a couple. I'm using air quotes, ghost hunts.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the equipment, and we went to Gettysburg and
Cool.
The Jenny Wade house, and we had some things that couldn't explain, but I'm sure people could find a way to explain it. But when you're sitting there and you hear somebody walking around, you're like, well, there's no one there. What is that?
Yeah.
But for me, the biggest thing was I woke up one middle of the night, and in the corner, the only thing I could describe it as is like a shadow man, but it looked like it had a cloak and a top hat on. Very strange. So
okay.
I rolled over because I was like, I'm not going to give it any power because it's probably my imagination. And then maybe within a minute, I couldn't get comfortable. I rolled back over towards where my wife's side of the bed, and the shadow had moved beside her. And then I freaked out, and I just rolled away and didn't look at it because it's like, it's got to be my imagination. And then a couple days later, it was got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I saw it again in the hallway directly in front of me, and I just said, no. And I went to the bathroom, and I haven't seen it since I said no.
But you just pushed it away, said, I'm not having any of this.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, maybe it was my imagination, but it seemed to have like definition and a shape that was consistent, every time I saw it. So for me, I was like, well, I'm sure someone could find a way to explain it, but they weren't sitting here looking at it and feeling like this sense of massive anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of what I was faced with a little bit in terms of, are there some explanations? Can I would say that, sure, you could say, well, enough about these people and enough about people's habits that maybe it was enough coincidence that you could kind of determine what people were doing hundreds of miles away. But all I can say is that it got to the point where I could tell someone what they were watching on television. Exactly. Wow. And for me, after enough experiences like this, I'm like, okay, so now I'm going to have to face the fact that the world doesn't work the way I thought it did. Maybe my consciousness, whatever the hell that is, whatever that means, and we don't know. That's the hard science. The hard problem in science is what they call it. We don't really know what consciousness is, but what that proved to me, at least, I'm like, all right, well, then my consciousness is not bound to my body. Now, that's neat. That's an exciting thing because that opens up all kinds of other questions. I'll tell you one thing. I'm not as afraid of death anymore. Now, that I didn't realize that at first. This was something that I had to kind of cope with down the road, and I had to kind of realize it in retrospect that there are a lot of benefits to this kind of worldview. But at first, it was jarring to go, wow, at night, maybe I'm there's some part of me that is able to leave, that's able to move outside my body and actually go travel to other places. Well, now I had to deal with that. So that gets hairy, and it opens up even more questions. It gets into, well, I kind of mentioned it on Midnight in the Desert with Dave. We talked about ghosts, their thing. They like to talk about ghosts. And I'm like, well, from another person's perspective, if I was, say, watching my girlfriend, watching what she was doing, and she was back at college or something, who knows, really far away. My question is, well, is it possible that she could have seen some essence of whatever it was that was watching her? Does that look like a ghost from someone's perspective? Do you follow me?
Yeah.
Like,
I was just about to ask you, like, is it possible?
Yeah.
Some of the sensations that we attribute to, like, oh man, this place is haunted.
Right.
It was just somebody doing that astral projection watching me.
Yeah. So we
Like,
assume
what if that thing in the corner was just?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, what you're saying exactly. Like, it started bringing up so many other questions that started tying in so many different questions about the paranormal, and so it just kept. I was always, of course, fascinated with ghosts and dinosaurs and aliens, but when I was a little kid, that who isn't? Everyone's fascinated with that. But then when these questions started really beating at my door, and I'm like, okay, clearly I have to actually face this stuff. Like, what does this mean to me? What's going on? But that is one of the questions that came up. Like, hey, well, now I've never seen a ghost. I've never had an experience where I can say, man, I saw some apparition like what you were talking about. I've never personally had any experience like that. I have seen what I would call a UFO. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, save it.
Yeah, we'll get to there. We don't want to make this too confusing. But yeah, I mean, I started wondering, well, what does that mean? Maybe ghost encounters, we assume that these are people who have died, but maybe it's someone who is confused. If consciousness is something that can just move around when we're asleep, meditating in altered states of consciousness, well, then that changes, our whole story about, what ghost encounters mean. Perhaps.
Right.
Again, I don't have that answer. I never had anybody on the other end, on the receiving end, going, I saw you or something like that. But I have had a few people say that they sensed at that same time, like, I sensed your presence. For some reason, all of a sudden I was thinking about you at this point. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Again, that could be a coincidence. I don't know, but it made me wonder, like, is there some kind of impression, that's left over on some level? And if you could see it, what would that look like? If there, would it be like some ghostly image of, of what I actually look like? I have no, I don't know.
When you were having these experiences at any time, were you ever scared, or did you scare yourself, with the experience?
Totally. I mean, there were it's almost like I felt this went on for years. So like I said, or as you said, that these experiences kicked in full blast at around the age of 19. And I felt that was interesting because I kind of was in a space in my life where I just finished high school, kind of finished my first, little triumph of getting into an adulthood. And I hadn't signed up for college yet. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was kind of in this weird space where, who am I? I was asking those questions at that point. So that was an important time for me. So, but I'm also 47 now. So we're saying this, this started some 25 years ago, and these experiences started happening almost every night. And sometimes these would go on for hours, and the questions just kept building. I almost felt in some ways like I was in a video game, where I felt that each time I would deal with some crazy situation, well, then the next time the stakes would go up a little higher. And then, and it was almost like the universe was going, oh, you think you can handle that? All right, I'm going to show you something even crazier then. And then I would experience something even nuttier where, I'd be then, I mean, there's been many times where I was going to places that did not look like Earth. I don't know what that means. You know, I don't know what that means at all. And I don't even have a theory on some level. I know that in quantum physics, there are theories about the multiverse. Is it possible that our consciousness can slip into these other multiverses? I don't know. Parallel dimensions, you know, it seems to follow is the best that I could say. But all I know is at the end of the day is what I experienced. And so they just kept getting stranger and stranger. And some experiences, there were a few that eventually scared the crap out of me so much I stopped lucid dreaming for a long time. I kind of, like you said, I kind of was at the point where I said, no, I can't deal with this anymore. This is too much. And we can talk about some of those experiences, but yeah, it got overwhelming. 'Cause it's like when you're dealing with mind bending and worldview changing experiences every night, that gets tiring after a while.
Right.
So it was a bit of fatigue and a bit of, you know, of me going, all right, now I've had like several experiences that are so, I feel like I'm going crazy here, you know? And of course I asked that too. I mean, I even thought, hey, maybe this is a real problem. Maybe I'm experiencing like seizures at night. Maybe, you know, this is the onset of schizophrenia or something, but yet as the years went on, I actually felt stronger than ever. I felt healthier than ever. You know, I mean, I'm a functioning member of society. I don't know. I wrote a book that got published. So I'm, you know, how crazy could I possibly be? Right.
Right.
So yeah, it's, that all can get overwhelming, but, well, I bet I was attacked a few times by characters in my dream who seemed to overpower me. For example, I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. This is my dream. How is somebody possibly stronger than me if this is my dream that I have full control over? That brings up questions.
Yeah.
I would run into characters who seem to have more information about topics than even I did, you know, talking to me on topics of science, for example, where I had no knowledge of. So, you know, those kind of things. But then they got even stranger, where to the point where, like I said, I finally said, all right, no. And now at this point in my life, I have a lucid dream, maybe a couple of times a month now. Most of my practice is very daytime sort of oriented. I meditate a lot, stuff like that. I've kind of brought that attention into my daily life, I would say more so. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
But it prompted another question.
Sure, yeah.
I was just like, you know, while you're having this state, this astral projection, whatever we're going to call it, have you ever had like a sensation or experience like, I'm not the only one here doing this?
Like I'm running into other people?
Yeah, like there's someone else doing it, or maybe someone watching somebody, like that being monitored. Like, I'm not the only one that can do this, and someone's around me right now.
I would say that yes, in terms of whenever I was in these states, there were times where, so the people who really study this type of stuff, and I'm a part of a lot of social media groups where we discuss these topics specifically, you know, on Facebook and whatnot. But we make a distinction sometimes between lucid dreaming and astral projection, and there definitely is a difference. So I would say that in pure lucid dreaming, I think that you are still kind of dealing with your own subconscious. You know, you're still kind of looking at your own demons, for whatever that means, you know, your own Jungian darkness, you know, those other you know, other things that are going on those other subconscious levels, but they are connected to you. But then when you move away from that and you start to really, whatever it means to leave your body, I still don't even know what that means, but when you do that, when I would do that, the people, or I shouldn't always say people, sometimes they were animals, sometimes they were non-human looking entities. They appeared every bit as conscious as I am. In fact, they would even tell me so, because I would actually get them involved in conversations. There were sometimes arguments I would have in these weird planes of consciousness where I'd be like, you know, what's going on? You know, this is my dream. How is it that, you know, I'm the one that's real. How is it that you don't agree with me on this topic. And they're like, well, yeah, but from my perspective, you're just as unreal as anything else. And I'm like, well, that's a good point. Well, maybe that's the way it is, that there is another perspective there that is looking at me going, yeah, but maybe I'm dreaming and you're the one that's the vision or the whatever. I'm like, all right, well, those are good arguments. But also in these discussions, I didn't know what these characters were going to say next, which by itself brings up a lot of questions like, hey, if this is my dream and I am totally in touch with my subconscious, I should know exactly, who's writing this dialogue, where's this coming from? I had as much knowledge about what was going to come out of their mouths as I know it's going to come out of your mouth next. I don't know what's going to happen. So that does imply some level of independent consciousness, and so I don't know. I don't know what that means. I couldn't tell you.
Now, boy,
yeah,
I'm very curious. But I
Sure.
I was looking over some of the information I have written down about you, and I need to know how this can lead into shape-shifting.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. All right. We're making a big jump here, but absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
So
yeah. Let's go for it.
I would say that, and yes, I am going to plug my book a bit, but there's a reason here.
Oh yeah, please do. I'm sorry I skipped over that.
No, you're fine. This is. I'm just saying this isn't just shameless plugging. There's a reason behind this. But definitely go out and buy my book. On top of that, that's what Tripping the Field is all about. What I'm trying to do with that book, and the book is fictional. I found it best that I wanted to write a ridiculous fictional account of these characters that I created, but the science in it, the experiences in it, and particularly the worldview that the book is built on, in my opinion, are absolutely accurate. They are absolutely a reflection of our world. So in the book kind of starts as you read it, as you read this adventure, you start learning the rules of this world. You start learning, oh, this is how lucid dreaming might tap into astral projection, which may tap into this, which may tap into that. So in answer to your question, I would say that it's going back to that magical place where you are independent of the drama, you're independent of the storyline. If you can get to that point, the theory is that you have greater control over your environment, not just on the dream world, but also in your waking world as well. My intuition now at this point, I feel that what I'm working on at this stage in my life is that I'm working with that idea specifically. Like, if I can wake up in my dreams and I can rise above them, then there is some version of this in my waking world. And this is the state that mystics and saints, holy men, shaman have been talking about for thousands of years. They have been talking about this idea that if you can come back to your center, that's one way to put it, but I'm being more specific. Your center is to detach from your drama. That's something that you can learn in your dreams. Not always as easy to do in your waking life, because you got to find a way to detach from your daily life drama, that, hey, for a moment, you've got to set aside every once in a while, man, I've got to pay the bills and pay the rent, and I'm dealing with this situation in this relationship or at work and yada, yada. And then what I'm saying is, if you can detach from that, even for a few minutes a day, then there is something about that you are going to this, and I've used this term before. It's a term that I like because I'm taking the spiritual sense out of it. I'm always trying to demystify this experience. I believe when you do that, you're going to what I like to call the ground state. And when I say the ground state, I mean you are returning to a state of not just consciousness, but possibly the source of everything. Now that I have experienced these things hundreds and hundreds of times, my conclusion is that the more that you can go into this center, this ground state, you are going into this space where that everything springs from, matter and energy. So, I mean, that's that's a big statement right there. But if I'll break it down for you, if you can go back to your source, is what I'm saying, then you could theoretically manipulate just about anything. And the strange thing about this is that the more that we investigate these things, there does seem to be a component to quantum physics that would agree with this statement. I don't want to go too deeply into the craziness of quantum physics, but I'll just say that there are properties of quantum mechanics where scientists have been finding for a long time, and they can prove this, by the way. This is not just some wacky hypothesis. This is proven theories that there is a component to our world where our consciousness, our ability to observe, the act of observing something can change things on the particle level. And particles are what everything is made of, atoms and whatnot. I mean, like I'm saying, just put it another way, at a base level, our awareness seems to impact how particles manifest in our world. So if that's the case, then I'm saying that could possibly explain all sorts of mystical phenomena over the years, through the ages, stories that we have had from time immemorial. I mean, we've had these ideas of spontaneous healing, of shape shifting. I have experienced shape shifting in my lucid dreams. I don't know yet what that means in my daily life, but I've certainly experienced spontaneous healing through some of these practices where I've been able to go into this ground state and heal things that are going on with me instantly, from giant situations like where I've had swellings, in my body. I actually felt like I contracted some form of arthritis from someone I was working on. That's a whole other story that we'll go into. But let's just say for now that spontaneous healing, all the things that have been attributed to whatever, holy people, medicine men, shaman over the centuries, I think that this connects all of it. And lucid dreaming is something that, like I said, I think that's the first step. I think that is something that we can all achieve.
Do you think, the particles in my brain are melting a little bit right now.
Fantastic. That's what I was going for. I'm trying to melt your particles.
Now, now, they always say this, that we only use a small percentage of our brain.
Sure.
Do you think when when you're doing this lucid dreaming, are you opening up some of the brain that you're just not using, giving you the ability to do a little bit extra? That in your waking life, when you are concerned about your bills and you got to go to your job, it's just shut down to you.
I'm not sure if it's extra. I'm not sure if we'd actually see. I can see that going either way, because I can see that more of the brain might be being utilized or even less of it. And I'll explain that, because there are some suggestions. I believe that there's been some MRIs done on people in certain altered states of consciousness where they have greater access to their language and symbolism centers. But when they look at it on the MRI, those are the specific centers that are actually shut down. So there's something to be said about this. And so I don't know if it's more brain activity or less brain activity. My attitude of the brain is I see it now more as a receiver. It is a radio. When you turn on your radio, the music is not coming out of that box. The sound waves may be helped by the speaker, but that signal, i.e. your consciousness, is not coming from that radio. It's coming from the airwaves. It's coming from elsewhere, right? And
Right.
The brain is then only a transmitter. And that hypothesis, that theory would also support my worldview again of what's really perhaps going on with these astral project. Maybe that's why we can, quote unquote, astrally project, because the brain is not really particularly, it's important in the fact that it is responsible for processing all of our daily information. It's filled with our memories. It's filled with our identities. It's filled with all of these details of our lives. But what I'm saying is that when we're getting back to consciousness, that ground state is everywhere. It is in fact, I would say that it is perhaps comes from the void. It comes from what I refer to in my book as the 0 point field. It is the vacuum. It's emptiness, empty space. I would say that empty space perhaps has the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is empty space. It's everywhere. Our brains are simply picking it up and translating it. If that kind of answers your question, well, is the brain being used more or less? Well, I can't really say. It's picking up a signal when we're awake, but when I'm lucid dreaming or I'm astrally projecting, you may actually see less activity in my brain because who cares? Who cares what's going on with my brain? My brain is it's just the receiver. It doesn't affect, either it's picking up the signal or it's not. The signal itself, it doesn't care whether or not it's being picked up or not. So that's why I also say my fear of death now is like, whatever, my body is just something that's picking up this signal. And when the body dies, well, the signal isn't going to care. It's still there. It's, still completely there. So yeah, that's a long way to answer your question.
Now this is where I put in the Keanu Reeves going, whoa. Again, my brain's spinning, but why don't we just jump on over? I have to because, again, big believer in UFOs. I really want to hear about your sighting 9 years ago.
Oh, yeah, that was about 9 years ago now, maybe 10 at this point. And, what's interesting about that is that was another topic that I had no opinion on. I've heard UFO stories forever, and I've always just sort of been like, man, there sure are a lot of people out there who have had, who don't seem to be able to, who don't seem to gain anything from making these stories up. That's all that I could say, because I never experienced anything myself. Mm-hmm. But after my experience, I started realizing that a lot of people in my family have seen UFOs, which is really odd. My dad, since my experience, my dad just saw a UFO about 4 years ago now, back in his hometown outside of Chicago, which is even stranger. And my father was basically a mechanical engineer for his entire life. He's a very, part A fits into part B sort of mentality, a very rational sort of a guy. He's the guy I attribute a lot of my ability to be, rational and distant from all the woo-woo sort of talk. But and then I found out my uncles on my mother's side had seen a famous sighting also outside of Chicago back in the 70s, I want to say it was. I don't remember the date exactly. I'd have to look it up. But with my experience, what happened was that I was simply driving. I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is already filled with a lot of very strange people to begin with. I was driving west. I was actually going to pick up my girlfriend who was working in some customer service job in some shopping mall or something. It was late at night. It was about 9 o'clock at night, somewhere around there. It was this. I want to say this was in October, and it was dark and it was windy. I remember it was very windy. And what happened is that this light on the horizon, it kind of seems to be coming near me, kind of flying towards the mountains. I'm driving east, away from the mountains, if I haven't made that clear. This thing is heading west. And just for a moment, it seemed to do this dip, as if it suddenly dropped down several hundred feet and then immediately jumped back up into position and resumed its course. Well, I wasn't really staring at this thing. I mean, I was on a road. The highway was pretty empty, but I was, still paying attention to the road. I didn't really have my full attention on this thing yet. But it was enough for me to go, well, wait, what just happened? What did I just see that thing do? It almost looked like this thing just dove and then jumped back, and without any sort of momentum, or dealing with the force of momentum or anything. I'm like, I know enough about physics that's not possible. What am I watching? So as this thing got closer and it started getting closer to kind of flying over my car, this thing, which again, it was dark. All I saw it had 3 lights. The lights were nothing out of the ordinary. They were just kind of rectangular lights, red, blue, white, nothing particularly weird, but suddenly this thing just stopped in midair, and then dashed to the other side of the horizon. Then it dashed back, and then if that wasn't enough, it started spinning as if it's like it spun in a circle at an insanely high speed, and then once again it like stopped as if again it was not affected by momentum or force, and then it resumed its course and it flew over my car. I was staring up through my windshield to try to get a look at, if there was a shape, if there was anything else that I could see, but I was kind of in a state of panic at that point because my brain knew at that point. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing something that absolutely doesn't make sense. And that's a special – all I can say is that I have a deep appreciation for that experience. When you are seeing something and your brain is kind of flipping through your files and your memories and your card catalog going, well, what does that? What else does that? My brain was – almost desperate for another explanation, like, well, could it be this? Could it be this? No, that doesn't make sense. Could it be this? Nothing. When I kept coming up with absolutely nothing, that leaves you in a very strange state of consciousness. So to me, that's why that experience is fascinating to me, because the people now that I'm talking to who have had ghost encounters, UFO encounters, anything with the paranormal, I think that's the thing that really separates those people from everyone else. It's that experience of, I saw something that I absolutely know in my heart of hearts, it doesn't make sense. And I think that's good for us. I think that is what really breaks us out of our molds. I think it breaks us out of our assumptions. And I think that's terribly important if we expect to really understand the world. So, yeah.
Wow, man. Whew. This has been intense. My brain's spinning a little bit.
Oh, good.
Love it. Do me a favor and just tell everybody about your book and how they can find it.
Absolutely. So it's called Tripping the Field, an existential crisis of ungodly proportions. And my editors and my publisher kind of veered me towards that strange subtitle. My original subtitle for the book was An Inconvenient Guide to Shape-Shifting. And I meant it as a joke, and I thought it was funny, but they were like, well, there's so many books out there that deal with there's a lot of young adult stuff that deals with vampires and werewolves, and people are going to think, oh, this is some weird, another occult sort of werewolf sort of book or something. I'm like, all right, I can appreciate that. So we changed up the title, but the book in many ways is kind of teaching you what I'm describing here. And it takes place with this worldview, and it starts teaching you all the rules of well, this is what this means. This is the implication of our consciousness being a ground state that we can tap into, being the source of all matter and energy. Well, we start exploring in the book, well, what does that really mean? What does that mean for religion? What does that mean for our philosophies? And it asks all of those kind of questions, and it's all wrapped up in a very wild, wacky adventure of these two professors who are from Colorado University out here in Boulder, who are kind of pulled into this international homicide case where this cult of these lunatic Christian missionaries have accidentally stumbled upon the ancient technique of shape-shifting from the shaman in some forgotten part of South America. And they get pulled into this mystery of what's happening. Are these people dangerous? What's going on? What does it mean for us if they are dangerous? Yada, yada, yada. And they have to start really exploring their own beliefs, and they have to start understanding what they can do to stop these the villains in the story. None of it takes itself terribly seriously because, again, my point in the book is to try to get this worldview across, and I did it hopefully in a fun way. The reviews have been coming in, and so far people agree that oh wow, I couldn't. People are telling me they can't put it down. Once they get into it, it is a mind bending. You're telling me right now you're feeling like your brain is a bit getting bent a bit. But this book will do that. It has that in spades. So you read enough of it and your brain will start melting. So that was the point. That was my intention. So it sounds like I've done what I was hoping to do. So that's the book in a nutshell. Tripping the Field. Yeah.
And where can people buy it?
You can find it anywhere. If you can get it directly from my publisher at Glad Eye Press. I'm sure that we'll add possibly some links when you actually post this, I would imagine. But if you just type in Tripping the Field, or if you type in Ian Jaydid, Jaydid, you can find it at anywhere through Amazon, through a number of places, Barnes & Noble, anywhere. If your local bookstore doesn't carry it, then you should beat on the counter and throw a tantrum and ask, why are you not carrying this most fantastic book? And just make a scene is what I'm suggesting. So yeah,
I'll definitely.
That's where I'm going with this.
I'll definitely put some links in the show notes. Did you do the cover art?
Great. I did. Did I mention that? Yeah, I'm an artist. That's right. Yeah,
since you do art, I saw the cover. I'm like, that's pretty wicked.
Thanks. I'm an artist first and a writer second. I mean, my skills at writing, I'll be the first to admit that I don't feel that I'm the best technical writer, but I feel I'm a good storyteller. But writing, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. But I was an artist forever. I've always been the weird kid who always knew how to draw, And so when I brought it to my publishers, I gave them a few ideas. I said, hey, if you're gonna go hire some graphic designer, I mean, I'm right here. Why don't I take a crack at this? So I gave them about three or four options, and they settled on one of them. They said, yeah, this is great. This is a lot of fun. It makes people curious. It's a weird, if you take a look at that cover art, it's kind of a strange, it's a very important scene from the book. The cover art shows one of our heroes in a car who's kind of being chased by this demonic entity. But if you look closely, he's got this, there's a crock pot in the back seat, because our book opens with one of our heroes driving furiously under the influence of some powerful hallucinogens, and he has a crock pot of ayahuasca, a South American brew, in his back seat, and he's explaining, he's like, the thing I've got to do now, if I want to save the world from ending this morning, I got to get a cup of this ayahuasca to my friend Dr. Eden Jessup, who has been kidnapped by this cult, and she's being held at this compound in Colorado. And he's become convinced that this is the only way to save the world. Somehow it involves him getting some of this hallucinogen into his friend, who perhaps can do something magical with it. So, and then the story plays out of explaining, well, why? How did we get to this place? And then we, yada yada yada. But that's the scene that you're seeing there on the front cover. There, you got a nervous guy running away from possibly some sort of demons who have been manifested into our waking world, and he's losing his mind a bit. So yeah, that's my cover art.
Yeah, no, the art's excellent. I can't wait to check the book out, because it sounds so
please,
so fascinating. Ian, this has been
fantastic.
An absolute blast. I'm so glad you had time to hang out with us. I might have questions.
So
I might have to email you like, I have another question.
Do it. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find out there. Twitter, Facebook, whatever you can find me. Yeah, or if you go onto my website, ianjaydid.com, that's really my hub for all of my projects. Are all kind of under that main website there. You can email me from there. You can kind of I'm trying to update it, keeping people updated as to what I'm doing next, interviews or whatnot. So I'm pretty easy to find right now. Yeah.
Awesome, and I can't thank you enough for hanging out with us. And hey, maybe we'll have you back on again, because this has been a blast.
Yeah,
I'd love to do it. Yeah, if you ever have more questions, I'm happy to jump into them.
Thank you so much, Ian. You have an awesome night.
Thank you,
and we'll talk very soon.
You too.
All right. Hey, one more time. Thanks, Ian. really, really appreciate you hanging out with us. That was so much fun. Lish?
Yeah, it was super fun talking to him and listening to some of these topics that I actually don't really know a whole lot about. I did come across an article that I guess psychologists or therapists are starting to use lucid dreaming as a way to have their patients cope with some of the things that they deal with. A lot of fears of like spiders, and then any kind of like nightmares that they, like recurring nightmares. They've been trying to teach their patients to use lucid dreaming to deal with that.
Interesting. See, fear of spiders. Check. You got that one.
Yeah.
Fear of snakes. That's mine.
I have that one too.
Every time I dream, half the time a snake pops up in the dream.
Oh, God.
I had one I was telling the other day that all of a sudden there was just a snake on the bed, and then they were like hanging on the ceilings.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, I need to get out of here right now. I wonder if lucid dreaming would help me.
I don't know.
Maybe. I don't either. But that was fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian. Yeah. There'll be links in the show notes to find his book and check out and learn more about Ian. Hey, this was fun to do. We'll have more special episodes coming your way. Until next time, remember, if it's not weird,
it's not worth checking out.